Okay, council, any agenda or questions on consent items? Not at the moment. Okay, councilor concerns? Not really. Okay.
O'Brien's not in here.
That's okay.
First item up then will be the annual housing report. Are you on your own? Need to have the green light on.
All right.
And
Hello, hello.
good evening.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Knapp and City Council members. My name is Charles Tso. I am an associate planner with the Planning Division. Today I'm here to share some key findings of the 2018 Annual Housing Report. And to give you guys a little bit of background, in 2013, the city completed a housing needs analysis in order to document the city's residential land supply over the next 20 years and to inform planning efforts for future residential growth. One of the key recommendations that came out of the report was a need for the city to develop a monitoring program to help the city understand the speed and efficiency at which land is developing and long-range residential planning needs. So I hope the information, and this is what this housing report is for. And so I hope the information from the report today will provide a starting point for discussion on housing affordability and development trends in the community. So to start, the purpose of the annual housing report is a snapshot of the city's housing development activities in a given year. And so the report tracks the production and the diversity of housing and discusses changes in our community's housing needs and affordability for both renting and owning a home and the projected growth and future housing needs of our community. So the housing report provides 4 main points. So it provides a summary of housing development in 2018 and it describes housing development activities by neighborhood, discusses anticipated changes to the city's future housing inventory, and shows past and present housing trends in affordability for rental and ownership housing. So to start, we'll take a look at a snapshot of housing development in 2018. So in 2018, the city permitted 184 homes, and that includes 128 single-family homes and 56 multifamily units. The split from last year between single-family and multifamily was about 70 and 30%. But overall, our housing stock has a fairly even split of for single-family and multifamily at 49 to 51%. And of the 184 permits issued last year, they're distributed across 3 areas in the city. And the neighborhood that saw the most housing construction was Villebois, where 139 permits were issued. Second to Villebois is Charbonneau, where 35 housing permits were issued. And the town center area received 10 housing permits. So to summarize the permits issued last year, if we look at all the single-family permits, the median lot size, so means a typical single-family lot, was about 3,100 square feet. The median home size, so a typical single-family home, the size of the home was about 2,500 square feet. The average net density from last year's development activity was about 15 units per acre. So now let's look at the number of housing permits issued in the past 5 years. So the city issued a higher than average number of permits from 2014 to 2016. And that's because mostly as we recover from the recession, there was a lot of pent-up demand. So we saw a very strong housing construction activity in those 3 years. But the numbers we saw in 2017 and 2018, they're actually closer to the average number of permits issued in the past 10 years. So just to give you a context for why the number seems to be trending down, it's just we're actually coming to the normal kind of market activity. And I should say the majority of permitted homes in the past 5 years has been single-family housing. So while we have seen strong growth in our housing inventory, our population has also been growing. And if we look at the growth trends for the past 10 years, population growth has mostly outpaced growth in housing. And last year, housing units grew at approximately 2%, where population grew approximately 4%. So what does this mean in terms of our projected growth in household and buildable land projections from Metro? So Metro forecasts that Wilsonville will grow at a rate of 1.8% per year for the 2014 to 2034 time span. However, our annual growth in population in household has actually surpassed that regional forecast average since we started tracking this progress in 2014. And so far, about 38% of Metro's projected household growth in the 20-year span has been accounted for in the past 5 years. So in other words, we've been growing faster than the Metro has forecasted. And in the past 5 years, we have consumed 35% of our 20-year buildable land supply for the same 2014 to 2034 time span. And I would note that this 20-year forecast did not include Frog Pond when it was made. So we have actually brought in a lot of new land to keep up with our growth and demand. But as we can see that we have been consuming land faster than Metro's projection, and that's reflecting our effort to keep up with housing demand. But we are also consistently putting in effort in both planning and other departments to try to bring additional residential land in the city to help us meet future demand for housing. So I want to shift gears to talk about affordability. So that's one of the other main component of the housing report. So affordability, before I start going into the discussion, I want to just say affordability typically means that a household does not spend more than 30% of its income on housing. So in 2018, the median sale price of a home in Wilsonville was about $447,000. But for a household earning median income, which is about $67,000 a year, the affordable home price cannot be higher than $342,000 per home. So as a result, the average home in Wilsonville costs about 31% more than what an average household can reasonably afford. And the cost of owning a home has also been increasing in terms of mortgage payments in the past 5 years. So the monthly mortgage payment of a home at the median price, which we saw earlier, was about $447,000. So the mortgage payment of that typical home is about 39% of a household's monthly income if they're making the median household income. When we look at income and housing affordability, it's also important to note that the median income for homeowners and renters are actually very different in our community. And so to talk about the affordability for renting, we have to look at the median income for renters. And this means that using the overall median income for all households for the purpose of evaluating rental housing affordability may skew the results. So the rental housing market is also unaffordable to households earning the median income, the rental households. The median rent price in 2018 was about $1,600 for just multifamily units. But if we look at all the housing units that are in the rental market, the rent is much higher. It's about $2,300 a month. And we saw a 2% increase for rent for the multifamily housing units. So for the median income, for renter households earning median income, which is at about $52,000 a year, this means that any rental unit that costs more than $1,300 a month is considered unaffordable to them. And as we just saw that the current median rent price for multifamily is much higher than what's considered affordable. It's about 23% higher. And if we look at the households in different income groups, so this is all households. At least 9 out of 10 households, whether they're renting or owning a home, if they earn below $20,000 a year, they're spending over 30% of their monthly income on housing, whether it's in the form of rent or mortgage payment or other costs that's required to have a roof over your head. If we look at all households earning below $50,000 a year, about 3 out of 4 spend over 30% of their monthly income on housing costs. So I just want to say, to kind of wrap it up, the information presented here will also be incorporated into the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan, which is the next item on the agenda. And the plan will be the next step to look deeper into affordability issues and develop policies and strategies to address these issues. But with that, I will open to questions for the discussion of the housing report. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. So, thank you. Council, questions at this point? Councilor West.
You talked about the medium-sized lot, and I was just for frame of reference, what size lot is like a 2,500 square foot home generally put? I just don't know, like, I see the number, but like visually, like what would that look like? Would that average size lot that we have fit a 2,500 square foot home, or is that like a row home, or is that, yeah, a two-story, yeah. Any two-story, like a skinny two-story, or?
Well, you live in Villabois.
Well, my first house was a skinnier two-story, and now I live in a wider two-story, so to me, those are different.
You're not gonna be able to put a 2,500 square foot ranch house on a 2,500 square foot lot. You would struggle to do that just because of the foundation.
So those lots,
Doesn't work out.
Right, exactly.
those lots on San Remo that back up to Graham's Ferry, all those Graham's Ferry homes that in Villawell that back, what are those like?
So, yeah,
5,000?
so based on just looking at the permits, the data, the typical row homes that we see in Villabois, their lot sizes are, as you can kind of see from the table, so the smallest lot from the permits we issued in 2018 was 802, and it's one of those row homes.
Okay.
But they do range from 800 to 1,000 or 1,100, 12,000. There's a wide range of how big of the lot sizes for the row homes. But yeah, I guess to answer your question, a typical 2,500 square feet lot, a home, because we also have lot coverage requirements, I know Villebois, it depends on the lot size. Typically, the smaller lots have a higher lot coverage. You could go up to like 75% covering the
Okay.
entire lot. So it also depends on the lot coverage. But yeah, obviously, because you cannot cover 100%, so, but yeah, and setbacks, and depends on the number of stories. If it's a single level home that's 2,500 square feet, you would need, maybe like at least 3,000 or 4,000 square feet lot to
Okay.
to keep it, yeah.
Okay,
So
that gives me an idea, thank you.
That median at 3157 there on a lot size is about a 50-foot by 60-foot or slightly over that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, that answers my question.
Thank you.
Others? Counselor Stevens?
So I would assume that with Metro, it's a moving target. When they do 20 years out, and then there's a reevaluation 10 or 15 years later, or
It's an average.
It's an average.
So some years you're going to be more, some years you're going to be less.
Right, we are, but when you say 20 years from this point in time, and 20 years, so say 2035, then doesn't Metro then do another evaluation later? Because they have to then go to 2055 or 2060. And then
I don't know if I can answer that accurately, but my knowledge says that they have underrated us for more than a decade, and they have never stepped up and said, well, maybe we're behind, maybe we need
Okay.
to figure
They
a
never acknowledge that.
higher growth average.
Well,
So
I'm
it
talking
doesn't
about-
seem like the history has factored in. Now, I don't know what they say officially.
Oh,
Here comes the official
Here comes the
answer.
Metro person. Yeah.
I'm gonna call in.
What does Metro do, Miranda?
They did make an exception with Frog Pond, so that
They
wasn't
did.
originally.
But I'm also asking regionally. I
Right.
mean, what's their
Yeah.
process?
Right,
Not
so-
just Wilsonville, but.
Yeah,
the
so
process.
I'm Miranda Bateshell, Planning Director for the City of Wilsonville. Metro goes through the urban growth boundary process every 6 years now. And through that process, they do the urban growth report. And through that, they basically reevaluate growth trends in the region. Through that, they work with us looking at buildable land supply, both from the residential standpoint and the employment standpoint. They work with the local parties, and we try to look at what are the trends overall in the region, and then also sub-regionally what might be happening. They do come up, though, with the generic trends, and they're trying to forecast when we might see recessions and when we might not see recessions, and it's over the long-term horizon, which is why oftentimes they kind of average out and they're a little bit conservative. And what part of the reason for us even beginning this housing report was we had been saying for years, but we're growing faster than that, and we've consistently been growing faster than that. And we have places like Villebois where we're projecting X number of households, and it's likely to grow at a faster rate than the urban growth report is assuming Wilsonville will be growing at. And so that's been part of the reason why we started this report. It was a recommendation that came out of the housing needs analysis we completed. Whenever we do a housing needs analysis, we look out 20 years. That's the requirement in the state process. So that's why you see this 2014 to 2034 time horizon, is because that was when we did our housing needs analysis, looking out 20 years to see what's our land supply, what's the demand, what's our likely growth, what are the demographics for that growth, and do we have the housing supply to meet that demand? And so that's why those dates are really tied together for us in this reporting we do every year, because we are looking back at our own housing needs analysis and tracking how much of that growth has actually occurred and what are the housing types and kind of what's going on with that. So that's where those numbers kind of fit together. And so Metro does refresh it, and so every year we share this report with them. And so we shared it again this year to show that we're still continuing growing faster than the 1.8% they
There's a
project.
reason
So
why
it's
they
relative.
prefer to be conservative too, because they don't want to see cities coming in saying, we need more land.
Right.
Because there are also constituents on the other side of the table that don't want to see conversion of farmland.
Right.
Just because you have aspirational goals
So you have
of
to
growing
actually
at
prove that you
5%.
need it, as
Right.
opposed to aspirational.
Yeah.
Right. And we can with our numbers.
Right.
Which is why we were able to bring in south and east. Correct.
Counselor
Oh.
Leah?
But to
Kristen.
follow up on that, can you explain a little bit more when you say what we need, what our housing needs are? Who is we?
Well,
The city of Wilsonville, are you talking, or the Portland Metro region?
So I was
The
talking
20-year
about the city of
buildable.
Wilsonville. So we
Okay.
were, for the housing needs analysis report that the city produced in 2013 for the 2014 to 2034 time horizon, the city looked at the existing buildable lands and then looked at projected growth. And looked at, the housing needs analysis both looked at Metro's numbers to do a comparison of, okay, if we grow at the rate projected by Metro, what does that look like in terms of total households and population growth? And then also looked at, from a city perspective, what we anticipated growth would be based on historical trends.
But my understanding is that it's not just Metro trying to predict what Wilsonville needs. They're predicting for the Portland Metro.
For the urban
Right.
growth report.
The 20-year buildable applies to Metro, not just to Wilsonville.
Right.
And when you.
Correct.
And so where, how is this, I mean, cities like Milwaukee, for instance, their 20-year buildable, where does that go?
Or Gladstone.
They have no boundary to move.
Right, same as Gladstone.
Same as Gladstone.
So
They
then
are
they
a
look at-
landlocked city, and so Gladstone is, Milwaukee is, most of the city of Portland is landlocked by other cities.
So my understanding is they look at everybody's comp plan and they say, okay, can you get there through maybe increasing density or other ways? And Portland has chosen the increasing in density.
Right, right. But the pressure on those of us at the edge,
Right.
the point I'm making here, is greater.
Right.
Yes.
But it shouldn't be viewed as necessarily as our responsibility to take all of that or expand because we have an open boundary on some side or another, whether it's us or Sherwood or those of us
Hillsborough.
on the fringe. But I know that expectation certainly is there on industrial lands, which is why we ended up taking it, us and Tualatin, the whole shootery for the region. So that was not that we needed industrial land or Tualatin needed industrial land. For crying out loud, we got more industrial land than any city anywhere.
Yeah.
But we took it
The
for
region.
the rest of the
Yeah.
region because they couldn't. So I just, want to keep in mind how much is our need
Right.
versus how much is the region counting on us because we sit on the fringe.
Right.
Counselor Akabo.
I had a question about one of the graphs, and actually it was included in the line where we're looking at population in housing.
Uh-huh.
Huh, there it is. So it makes sense to me, right? You build a house, next year, boom, population, right? Like it follows. Then they move in to the house, right? And so it's mirrored. But then at the end, the story there is that more people are living in the homes that are being built? Is that, or am I oversimplifying? I'm trying to understand what happened at the end.
More people are moving here than we're
Yeah.
building homes.
But
So
where are they living
Where
is the
are
question.
they? Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Or is this reflective of like different sorts of living situations that
Could
we
be.
see, right?
It can be,
Or-
and it can also be population growth within households.
Okay.
So maybe more people are moving.
So
here,
like
more
younger families and now like
Could be.
everyone's having babies or
Could
like that?
It could be
Okay.
people moving into apartments that, typically would only be a two-bedroom with two people, might be two-bedroom with four people.
Right,
Just because of rents.
exactly. That's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure out, like,
Yeah.
what is this reflecting for the shape of like people?
Yeah.
Not just the homes, but the actual people that are in these structures that we have.
Right. So I want to provide a little bit of context for the report. So we try to, when we prepare this report every year, we try to report out the numbers. the data that we see, we collect the data from census, from our own permits. So we try not to provide a lot of interpretation or any kind of, I guess, policy interpretation behind these numbers. So when I see this chart, what I see is we're growing really fast, both in terms of population, and we're also building a lot of homes. Now, I guess, me as an individual, I wonder, okay, so does that mean when we build the homes, people can't live in them, or what kind of living situation are they arranging? But to me, as a planner, what I see is people want to come and live here, and I guess it's up to you as the decision maker to decide if we want to make sure, if somebody wants to move here to be part of our community, whether they come from a different place where they grow up here and maybe moved away but want to come back, or they want to retire here, should we think about what we can do to provide a home for them? So what I see is people are moving here, we're growing fast, and in a scenario where we don't provide enough homes, but people still want to move here because this is a really good community, then it becomes a bidding competition. And the prices go up, and I think one can guess that then it becomes those with more resources and more income get to become part of this community. And it's not for me to say whether that's desirable or not, but that's what the report is for, is to show these trends and provide a starting point for discussion.
Thank you.
So when I was looking at this earlier, the report, it's very good for us to be thinking about in terms of the buildable lands requirements and Metro's requirements and et cetera. But it leaves a few things that I would like to see and maybe it's coming up later in the equitable piece, but what kind of housing, it would be nice to know what our specialty housing numbers are, which is to say senior assisted, hospice and dementia care. Are those counted in there? I'm presuming that they are living units. But also the mentally ill and developmentally disabled, which covers a whole range from apartments to group living homes. Is that in there, and are we just looking at the structure from the outside, or what? And the other piece of information would be good to have is how much is subsidized already? How much HUD housing do we have? Section 8 housing do we have? That I would be curious to know we have now, and are those numbers staying steady, or do they change? And as you brought up, be good to know over time demographics. Mm-hmm. Is our average age staying the same? Size of family staying the same? Or is our population getting significantly older because we have more seniors assisted or whatever? It's that deeper dive into what our housing thing is made up of besides just houses and apartments.
Right, so it is, yeah.
That doesn't tell us a whole lot about what's changing or what the needs are.
Yeah, so I know we need to move on to the next topic. Some of that is coming through the Equitable Housing Work Program and the market analysis that we'll be looking at. It's interesting because when we first started this, it really was just about tracking activity. Most of the cities in the region aren't even tracking that to begin with.
Yeah, it's a building official report more than.
Yeah, but each year it's evolved, right? And each year there have been more questions from the Planning Commission and the Council, and we've dove deeper into things like this affordability. And now that we've been tracking it for 5 years, we start to be able to see trends, whereas in the first 2 years, there were no trends really to compare. So these are great questions. All of those units are in the total counts when we look at like what is the total picture.
Right, they're in
We're
the
not
total.
really describing them very
Right.
well in this report because it's really a snapshot of a year. And in each of the last few years, those developments haven't come online. They're developments that have previously come online in the city. But through the equitable housing strategic plan, that'll be looking more as like an overall kind of overview of our supply as opposed to just an annual snapshot.
That's a great segue.
Okay.
Welcome.
I'd like to add one more thing to that, though, that might be helpful in the
Yeah.
next report, is what I was questioning was, when you look at multifamily, there's a big difference between a one-bedroom or even a studio apartment and a three-bedroom apartment. And they're multifamily, but, units, but
Yeah.
totally different, totally in terms of use and all those things. So if you're digging deep, that would be helpful.
And then one last thing, since I know something about this because I'm in the middle of it, but is vacation rentals.
Or
So-
ADUs.
ADUs is one piece, but vacation rentals is another one, and I don't think it is a big impact on our housing in Wilsonville, because I know I'm still the only VRBO in town, but there are a number of Airbnbs, and in a lot of places, that's a significant impact on available housing. Places
Yeah.
like Hood
San
River,
Francisco.
Yeah.
Huge.
yeah, all along the coast.
Yeah.
Seattle, Portland.
So that seems like another thing that we should be able to track with our business licenses, because they're supposed to have a business license to pay the TRT taxes, but it would be good to get used to monitoring that. I don't watch Airbnb, so I don't know what's going on there.
There's a
But they take up housing units, and they drive prices.
We do track ADUs. Last year, we didn't have any ADUs built, so that's not reported. But in previous reports, if there is ADUs being constructed, we do report that
As a unit.
as a unit, yeah.
All right, obviously, there's a lot more information that people are looking for, and, like you say, it keeps getting more complicated, but that's the project. So I think planners are, have some job security there, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to have to push along here a little quicker. Equitable Housing Strategic Plan, if we could, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Knapp and councilors. My name is Kimberly Reibold, Senior Planner with the city, and just want to take a few moments here and bring you some updates on the Equitable Housing Strategic Plan project. We're very excited to finally have this project kicking off. I think it's been a few years since we applied for this grant through Metro. It was back in 2016, and so I think I had a really great introduction to the topic. I don't know how I could get teed up any better. But very quickly, just want to walk through the agenda of what I hope to get from our discussion tonight. Just a quick overview of where we are with the project, and really just present to you what we see as being the project roles of different groups, both City Council as well as Planning Commission, other stakeholders in the project task force. We have been working also with our consultant team to draft some initial policy objectives. We're not going to finalize anything tonight, but we just wanted to put those in front of you just to take a first look and make sure that we're all in agreement on the path and track forward. After my presentation, I'll walk through very briefly what the next steps are, and then we'll have some time for discussion as well as an appointment to our task force. So with that, I just want to quickly highlight the goals. This was mentioned previously. The main goal of this project is to document housing gaps that are affecting community members. And when I say housing gaps, I mean not only in types of housing, so different unit types, where we might have a plenty or a few, but as well income gaps and income ranges that we are able to meet. I think the presentation you just saw really illustrated that there are some gaps, but we hope to tease out a little more where those gaps are affecting people the most. As we do this project, the end goal is to devise at least 6 strategies that the city will pursue to help close some of these housing gaps. So we're not going to be within the confines of this project actually doing any of the strategies right now, but we're really looking at identifying what strategies might work well for Wilsonville and meet the needs and they help to close the gaps that we identify. So with that, just would like to quickly highlight what we see as project roles. Our initial work with the consultant team, we're really trying to shape who we're talking to and what we're hoping to get out of different groups. So I've included a handout within your packet that talks a little more about these groups, but a couple of the things that I wanted to highlight that are a little unique about this project. We are going to be putting together a task force. We are hoping to have, there's a couple of pieces to this task force, one of which is some direct solicitations that we are doing to people with very good technical expertise on the topic. So we're reaching out to other agencies, particularly agencies and nonprofit partners that work in affordable housing, housing finance, as well as seeking, whether or not we have any representation through our school district or anybody that might have an awareness of what the needs are in the community to share their expertise and provide some good policy ideas. So really trying to seek information from people who know these topics well. With that, we do think it's important that we might have members living in our community or working in our community that have this kind of professional knowledge too. So we will be opening up an application window for seats on this task force, hopefully here within the next week or so, to identify people, again, that can contribute to that list of policy options and bring that information to you all. We are going to be involving the Planning Commission as well, but one of the differences I want to point out from our typical planning projects, we usually rely upon them pretty heavily to weigh some of these policy discussions. I think we recognize that while planning, we're kind of leading this project, it's really multidisciplinary, and the strategies that come out of this might affect things far beyond the purview of what the Planning Commission does, what my professional expertise is, and so we want to use them in their role of being able to take in input from the community and hear those concerns and discuss those concerns. But we really are looking to the City Council to do the heavy lifting when it comes to weighing the priorities and strategies and ultimately figuring out that path forward to go into the equitable housing strategic plan. So just want to run that by you, make sure that we're all on the same page with those project roles. So just a quick overview of the process. Where we are is we're at the beginning of the arrow right now. We're starting to work with our consultant team, Echo Northwest, to develop some market research. So I think some of these questions that have come up that we want to probe a little deeper beyond the initial set of facts and figures, we're hoping to do with that market research. One key piece of this is that Clackamas County is currently undergoing a housing needs analysis. And with that, they're also working through the same consultant team, different consultant team, same consultant, but they are going to be putting together some updated information about our housing needs. It won't be quite as formal of a report as what was done for the city in 2014, but it should give us some updated information, particularly related to demographics. They are working through some of that, and it will kind of give us a better snapshot in time as to where we are with our expected demand, as well as the land that we've recently brought into the UGB and how that might serve us in the next 20 years. So our project team for equitable housing will be taking that information, as well as looking into some additional data, particularly as it relates to income levels, demographics, the housing stock we have, rents, and all of those things to help give us more of a fine-grained look at what some of the trends are affecting the community, as well as where those gaps truly are, so we know what kind of strategies might work best. Throughout the summer, we are also going to be embarking on some stakeholder outreach to kind of get more of a sense of the learned experience. So, we've got the data-driven piece of this, which is the market research, but the human side to this is the stakeholder outreach. So we're working with our consultant team to finalize our plan for outreach. So we see this as a series of one-on-one meetings, focus groups, surveys, things of the like, to really have some conversations about what people's experiences are. Both people who are, in the process of obtaining or looking for housing or have recently gone through that, as well as employers in the community to get a sense of what they've been hearing, and, housing providers to try to get some more information from them. Once we have that, the task force will weigh everything they hear, take their experience, and develop some policies to bring forward to you all. With that, we'll prioritize those policies, and those will become the basis for the strategic plan. And we hope to have a final version of that document wrapped up in the spring of 2020. So the last piece here that I have are some very high-level policy objectives. These are drawn from many of the ideas that were expressed when the city first applied for this grant from Metro. So we've tried to keep these really high level. They're a starting discussion point in terms of what does long-term success look like. Knowing that some of the strategies we choose to pursue might take a while. These are really kind of what are our guiding visions here? What are we trying to achieve? So I'll give you a minute to take a look at these. We can come back to this slide when we get to the discussion piece. This is something that we will revisit. This is something that you might still be chewing on once we have the policies. We obviously haven't done that work yet, but I think we all want to keep in mind, why are we here and what are we trying to do? So. All right. So very briefly, the next steps for the project. As I mentioned, we are currently beginning to assemble a task force. We're hoping to have the first meeting in mid-July. So if we can get everything up and running with getting a press release out, certainly, if you have somebody that you know of in the community that you think has a good technical background in these areas that would contribute to the conversation, I would love to know who they are so I can solicit them directly. Please let me know. And we hope to have that window open for at least a few weeks to be able to get to that mid-July meeting. We're going to also, by the next time we come back to you, we'll have more of a finalized stakeholder engagement plan, which we will be starting to implement. And we expect that we will be back before you with the consultants to present market research report findings and look at these policy objectives again in an August City Council work session. So these are our 3 points of discussion. I will take them in any order you choose, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Council, questions or comments? Councilor Lehan.
Can you back up on where you had all those
Yes.
many things around there? Yeah. Describe what you mean by reduced risk of housing displacement.
So we had a good chat about this one this morning, actually. There is a notion, and without having the data, I don't know if this is how much of an issue this is. But it's something when the big conversation among housing and housing affordability, particularly in larger cities, is that as growth happens and investment occurs, that people who live somewhere get displaced when rents increase. I don't know the extent to which that has been taking place in Wilsonville, but we have had, people say, my rent's getting too high. And there's two pieces, right? So there's one, somebody actually physically being displaced from where they live because they can't pay the rent anymore and they have to move somewhere else. The other piece is, not being able to stay in Wilsonville. maybe they want to move somewhere else, but they can't afford it, so they become displaced from the community because there isn't the right type of housing for them to stay here beyond what they currently have. So that's, there's always, I don't think there's any sort of magical solution that is going to prevent that from happening altogether, but I think we thought that one goal is to really, we want to try to do what we can to keep that from happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it occurred to me with that one is, of course, our hugest housing displacement ever was when Thunderbird closed.
Mhm.
And we scrambled for a couple of years on that one, for several years. But I see it's coming up again later, the
Walnut Creek,
Walnut Creek.
right?
Is trying to protect Walnut Creek. So I didn't mention that on the other deal, but mobile home parks or mobile homes, I presume those are classified as single-family homes in the previous.
I'm getting a nod, yes. from-
So we haven't run into this issue because since we started tracking for the housing report, we have not received, I don't think we have counted permits from mobile home.
But it's part of our housing inventory.
But it is, yeah, and I think they are
Single family.
classified as single family. Yes, that's
Single family,
correct, yes.
Well, I mean, we used to have 5 mobile home parks, and we're down to 2. And so I think that making an effort to not lose the remaining 2 we have is probably an important piece
Strategy.
of the strategy. And the other one, increased opportunities for Wilsonville employees to live in the city. Do we know what it is with the city employees?
I think we do have that data. So I think we have to track it through SMART, don't we? Aren't we required as employees to fill out a survey because we're over a certain number of employees?
The ECO survey for DEQ?
Is that what it is? Yeah, I think I remember.
I'd have
Do
to
we
check.
know how many?
Maybe we don't do it anymore?
Or the percentage of,
I can get that for you somehow.
Right, I think the last time I knew, is
Yes.
it was 11% of the people who live here, I think it was in the survey, 11% of the people who live here also work here, of the population, not the
No,
city staff.
So the
Wasn't
overall
that 12
population, I think it's
12%?
like something like 80% of the people who live here work somewhere else,
Yeah.
and 80% of the people who work here live somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah,
Something to that effect.
something like
Mhm.
that, yeah, so it was
Yeah.
pretty huge.
And the work that Clackamas County is doing, they have updated statistics for that as well. I mean, it's the same general patterns that we've been seeing. And, that's one of those things too, there's a multitude of reasons why somebody might not live in the city, split commutes often are a factor. But there probably are a certain subset of those employees that, cost potentially is the issue. And so, thinking about what, again, these are very high level, but, what might be those things that can be done?
So you're targeting the employees that maybe would like to live here, because everybody makes a choice about where they're living for different
Exactly.
reasons. So you're not, if you're looking at something like in Santa Clara, they're losing teachers and firefighters and police officers because they can't afford to live in those communities. So they're looking at possible considerations for developing affordable housing strategies for those employees. We don't want to make the assumption that employees aren't living here because they can't afford to live here.
Right.
We would drill down on that issue.
Right, because that one seems to me to be one that comes up, like, we should be
Right.
doing that, and I think it's a fool's errand.
I
but,
agree.
Because I think we will never get there. I think there are many logical reasons, and I would start with the city employees and just find out how many of them live here.
Right.
Because, anyway, I could posit several things.
Well, and I think, one important thing to note, we can keep these parked here for now. We can, if we want to remove some, add some later. I think, if there are strong feelings on any of them, I mean, that's
I think
helpful for
what she
us to know
suggested is
now.
we just want to
but
be real
yeah.
careful about making assumptions about why people choose to live
Oh,
in place.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think the intent is that, if somebody wants to live here and they feel like they can't.
Yeah. Is cost the burden that's keeping them from being here?
Exactly.
Then there might be a policy you could look
Yeah.
at for
Right.
that.
Well, I mean, it is, but the other way to look at it is, you can get a lot more house in Sherwood
Right.
or Canby than you can in Wilsonville. And that's not very far to commute.
Right.
If you work here, to commute from Sherwood to Wilsonville, or commute from Canby to Wilsonville, and you get a lot more house over there because Wilsonville is so popular because of our transportation nexus for all those other people who do not work here, but it's convenient for them to go to Salem, for them to go to Portland or Oregon City or wherever and split commute. So we have that transportation premium that drives our prices up. So for people who work here, they'll get a better deal
Right.
with a 5-mile commute from,
That's one factor. I think anecdotally.
it's not that they
too,
couldn't afford it.
We also have a
You
lot
get a
of
better
people,
deal.
married couples, one works in Portland, the other works in Salem.
Yep.
But just for the
I've never
Citizens
heard of
Academy,
that.
we get a lot of that with folks just anecdotally saying, we just chose it because it's equidistant.
Yeah, and
Yes.
and for that couple, or for that family, Sherwood is not a good choice.
No.
No,
It's not on
terrible.
the I-5
It's
corridor.
not on the corridor. So we carry that premium of being on the corridor, but for people commuting in, Sherwood is an excellent choice, or Canby, or whatever.
So
Toolwood.
what I'm hearing is, let's be careful about assumptions.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's why we chose the word opportunities,
Yeah,
is to gives us the
Yes.
flexibility to dig deeper into the data to identify.
I'm
Actual
getting
reasons.
looks from Dwight that this is his time.
So with that,
Okay.
if,
all.
we'll come back to this,
Yeah.
and we'll keep these things in mind. My one thing I need before I go is the appointment of a task force member to serve as chair. So I will ask for that, and then I will leave.
Good luck, we don't have the half hour to do that.
So
Does
you would-
anybody want to
you-
volunteer?
You would like, yeah, does anybody want to volunteer?
I will volunteer.
Okay, what's it encompass?
So essentially,
I want to know that.
I read it.
Okay, so that's good, you read it. So, I think we typically in the past, we do ask for a counselor to represent, as well as a planning commissioner, to hear the discussion firsthand. So you'd be reporting back what you've been hearing, so you're that direct connection. And as well, if you're serving as chair, you're just making sure you're facilitating the meeting, making sure everybody has an opportunity to have their perspective and point of view heard fairly. The thing is, this task force is not one that's expected to be voting necessarily. It's more of a think tank idea generator kind of task force, so.
Is there anyone else that would like to think about doing that, or is it Mr. West?
I think we can, I'm supportive of that. If there is a need for an alternate, because I know that sometimes we do that, I'm happy to
Okay,
That might be a good
serve as an
idea.
alternate.
all right, well,
That'd be
if
great.
Yeah.
council is comfortable with that, we'll accept Mr. West's offer and
Are you
ask.
suggesting that you would be the alternate?
Oh, no, yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's
that-
what I
Okay.
meant as well.
That'd be-
Is that okay? Or
That'd be great.
And I would like to, no. Yeah.
Just down the line.
You want to be the alternate to the
The
alternate?
alternate.
No, I do not.
Joking.
All right, does that work for you?
Perfect, thank
Okay.
you so much.
Thank you.
Smart people. Shave 5 minutes off your time, I apologize, but,
Well, we hope to be brief, and then we'll yield back the balance.
okay, good.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, council. My name is Dwight Brashear. I'm the transit director for SMART. To my right is Eric Loomis. He is the operations manager. And then to his right is Nicole Hendricks. She is the transit management analyst. It's a long title there. And we are excited to be here this evening. We listening to all of the talk about equity does our heart good, because I think why we exist, one of the primary reasons we exist, is to provide equity and to provide freedom. And that's what we try to do every day on our system. And we do that in a number of ways, because here in Wilsonville, it's free. And there is nothing more equitable in my experience than free. Free doesn't discriminate against anyone. So we love what we do. And so today, we're hoping to kind of give you an update and also get a little bit of guidance from you. Transit generally tends not to be controversial. We try to keep it that way. But every now and then, we run into a little stumbling block that we may need help from the council on, and this is one of those times. And so I will turn it over to Eric and Nicole. They will kind of go through this program enhancement strategy. The HB 2017 money that we talked about now over a year ago has started to flow. The spigot is open, and the money is coming in. And so now we have.
Showed off Velvet TriMet right now.
Well, yeah, I didn't want to go into that. Yeah, that's yes, you're going to get me started, Brian. All right, I promised I wouldn't do it. Anyway, the money is there. It's been sitting, waiting for us since May 15th. And we hope to receive it by July 1st. And so we do have a plan in place. If you recall, we came before the council, and you helped us kind of put together a strategy, a couple of different lists of projects. And so we have put those projects, we put pen to paper. We've got those projects ready to go. And part of that project, that project list was the electric buses. As you know, they are on the ground. As I shared with Brian and Gina on Friday, who they actually got to take a ride on those vehicles, they are right now overperforming. And I know some of that makes you disappointed, I know, but they are traveling further, doing better than we anticipated, as are the charging systems for those buses. So my hat is off to Scott Simonton, who brought that project together, an incredible genius when it comes to these type of things. He saw this in his crystal ball, that this was the best option for us, and it's already paying dividends for us. So in any event, just wanted to share that with you. So Eric, we'll turn it over to you and Nicole, and you guys can amaze these folks here.
All right, well, good evening. So I guess just a preface here with, we're focusing on the operations side projects through the program enhancements of HB 2017. There also is, as Dwight mentioned, the capital procurement of alternative fueled vehicles, electric and CNG. And then there's also a planning project we have that we're going to be looking at in 2020 that focuses on the Frog Pond area and the transit needs that are there. So with that, we'll dive into just an overview of some of the route changes we have. And before we get into the details of that, I'll turn it over to Nicole to talk about some of the outreach we did to get to the point we're at.
Hi, everyone. So as Dwight and Eric mentioned, this is kind of a preparation from, or a result of the House Bill 2017 outreach we did. We did a full month of outreach in June of 2018 to help develop a project list. And we had 159 survey responses that guided the prioritization for projects. And so this is a result of the outreach that we did. And it pulls from our transit master plan outreach when we had our citizen task force. We did a couple community surveys, and we're really heavily involved in what the public wanted. So.
Okay. So looking at this overview, you can see some of the routes don't have text next to them. Those are the routes that are status quo. The ones that do, I'll go through here. So the 1X, it's a little small, but just the illustration of showing you in the center of the slide there is the 2 trips that we're adding midday, and then 1 trips that our partner Chariots in Salem is adding. was originally a commuter route. Now we're adding 3 trips in the midday to help folks out that may need that ride home in the middle of the day that are, don't have transit during that time.
And we've heard a lot from our current 1X riders that they were like, please give us more mid-morning and midday trips, so. And we will be notifying TMP, like listservs that we had, and current riders of these changes, so, yeah, we're excited.
So you can see the frequency, obviously midday isn't as much, we don't anticipate as much passenger traffic as we would during commuter hours.
And we do plan to go back to Chariots and ask that they kind of match what we've done. We've added 2 trips. We'd like for them to add at least another trip.
Yeah, and one thing they've been talking about, discussing, not this round, but next round of HB 2017 projects is looking at Saturday service for the 1X as well. The 2X for the weekday service, our current service goes from 5 a.m. to about 9 p.m. Every 30 minutes during commuter times and 60 minutes during off-peak, so that's midday and later in the evenings. That's going to change significantly to approximately 15-minute service during the commuter times and then about half-hour service during non-peak service. So basically cutting all those times in half. And this is where the big change of the route is we're no longer going to be going to Barber Transit Center, but we're going to go to Tualatin Park and Ride instead and make the connections with TriMet there.
Is your mic on?
It is.
Need to get closer
Oh,
to it?
closer,
Is that-
yeah.
There we
Thank
go.
you.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll have frequencies cut in half there for both commuter times and midday as well. For Saturday, for the 2X, again, the times will stay similar, start a little bit early and end a little later, but the frequency will be 30 minutes rather than 60-minute frequency on those. So Route 2 fare analysis. So this is what we're looking at with the 2X changes to Tigard. Now, above and beyond the HB 2017 funding, we're getting TriMet. We got a grant through TriMet, the Regional Coordination Program grant, to help pay for any services we offer inside TriMet's service district. So as soon as we cross the northern border of Wilsonville, that's TriMet's service district. So anything we operate on the 2X in their service district, they're going to pay us for since we're successful in getting that grant. Part of that grant was for them to pay for the fares that we would normally receive from that ridership going into Tualatin. So you can see the weekday service, the TriMet Regional Coordination Program, the RCP, is about 75% of our passengers, and that fare that was included in that grant is $75,000. The part that's not included in that grant is the midday service, and that the fare we would receive from that is about 26%, which we expect to be about $26,000 for that. So the total fare incurred that we would receive back from customers would be $100,000. Weekend service, so this is a 2X we run on weekends. Our ridership for this last fiscal year we had, it was about 2,700 with different fare types, as you can see down the passenger groups there. Our normal fares, our general public fare is $1.50. Youth Senior and persons with disabilities is half price. So that's the fare collected for Saturdays. So with the fare analysis, we're here to ask the council is different alternatives, to choose an alternative for our fare. And so alternative one is customers ride free all day on the Route 2X. So that's TriMet, us getting the full funding from that RCP, the Regional Coordination Program. And then there's the local match that we would be paying for the in-town service for the 2X. And then the STIF funding as well.
Just to be clear, that local match basically is just indicative of the fact that we don't charge, so we get to allow that as a local match.
Well, so let me back up a little bit. So that local match currently, before we move into the changes that are occurring in September, our Route 2X, it costs about $1.2 million. So what this is doing, between STIF and TriMet, they're paying almost $1 million of that. With the increases in service, that increases our costs up to about 1.5. So our local was previously 1.2, now it's going to be about 560,000.
Good clarification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's
yes,
the key
yes,
part
thank you
right
for
there.
bringing that up. Yeah. So you can see in all three alternatives, that price stays fairly consistent. The alternative two, one we certainly don't recommend is staff, just because it complicates the fare cost for our riders, our customers. And that is riding for free on the 2X during commuter hours, so TriMet's RCP funding paying for the commuter times. And then we charge customers fare during the midday service of that $1.50 or the reduced fare as well. And then the alternative three would be customers end up paying a fare to keep it consistent all day long, and then any fare we collect during the commuter times that the RCP grant, we would be receiving that funding from TriMet. We would then pay that back to TriMet, whatever, which is the estimated
So
$75,000.
that's an accounting
Yeah.
function.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They're going to give us the entire amount that we asked for, and we would just have to make that adjustment and refund them that 75,000. It's 150 over the 2-year period.
Yeah.
75,000 a year.
Yeah, the 2 years.
And the reason for the increase, we normally collect, I think, about 60,000 a year is what we're estimating on the 2X.
For the 2X,
And this is SMART's first high-frequency route that I know of. And a high-frequency route is any route that operates on headways of 15 minutes or less. And so we're trying to match TriMet's routes that go into the Bridgeport Transit Center there, and I think there are a total of 5 that we would connect with, and at least 1 or 2 of them are high-frequency routes. And so in order to get our customers to and from there, we thought it was necessary to kind of match their frequency. And so we put together, and I will say it, if you like this idea in any way, shape, or form, then, it was a collaboration. If you hate it, then it was my idea. We looked at HB 2017, we looked at the spirit, we looked of the legislation, and it talked about creating equity for folks. And we thought that the best way we could do that was to offer a trip to Portland, if you will. Eventually, we'd like to go all the way into Portland at no cost. But of course, we have the scenarios here. We can fix this in any way the council would like us to. Our recommendation.
Laying out options, right?
Yes.
But which of these options would be the easiest to implement, the least amount of accounting, and which would be the most seamless and advantageous for the rider?
That would be alternative 1,
Okay.
which is just making
I would
the
think
entire thing.
council would need to know those
Right.
2 pieces.
The one where we can make the AM and PM peak, we can make that free based on TriMet funding it, and then charge, off-peak is confusing for the customers, and certainly will be confusing for the drivers. And if there's a cutoff, at 10:01, we start charging, and somebody gets on and the bus is a few minutes, then you have an argument over, whether the bus was on time or not and whether they have to pay.
So one other cost control question.
Mhm.
This would be funded for a year?
2 years right
2 years.
now.
And we're guaranteed grant money for those 2 years? Is that
Yes.
included any inflationary stuff on our end in terms of our costs?
Well, we built, when we priced it, put it together, we built in as much as we could. And
Okay.
so it's covering.
Did you work with Keith on that?
Keith was
You did?
involved,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
yes,
All right.
absolutely.
So what, the other, I think, policy-related thing that might be of concern to council, I don't know, is have you factored in what happens if the grant money goes away? I mean, how that's going to make riders feel about having to pay for a service that they were getting for quote-unquote free?
Well, yes, and we've thought about that. And the way the funding is set up now, TriMet has put $2 million out there for competitive bid. They'll do it again in 2 years. What they've admitted was that once these programs are funded, they're going to be hard pressed to pull the money. We're getting some of it, Clackamas County is getting, that operates the Mount Hood Express. I think, Washington County, Multnomah County, the community college is getting some funding for it. And so we got in early because TriMet, there is no escalator in it for TriMet, meaning it's $2 million and they're planning to fund it at $2 million moving forward. So there probably won't be any new service being added. And so as long as our service is performing, and we have to keep, track all the metrics for it, the likelihood is that, they'll just continue to fund it. I'm not, as I'm sitting here, that's not a concern of mine right now. Yeah.
Any other questions?
So my recollection was one of the reasons that we did started fairs on the out of town was because of the homeless situation. Do we think that's not, that people would ride the bus all day
Well,
back and forth? Is that no longer a concern?
We have
You know,
policies on that.
it's funny you brought that up because as the executive team was meeting today, it just struck me out of the blue that I wanted to share with you that the ordinances that this council put forth and are now,
You can't ride, yeah.
yeah, we've had, when I say zero issues with it, I mean zero issues. I mean, the drivers really appreciate it. They seem, they get out there with a lot more confidence when it comes to things like that. And we haven't had any issues whatsoever. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think the other argument from, at least I've heard from the chamber and some of the meetings that Tim and I have been in, is that since the employers are invested, the riders should also be invested. But I think that argument kind of went away with 2017 because everybody has a job is paying that payroll tax in
contributing
the
to it.
Portland region, right? So
Right.
that they do have skin in the game now.
Right. And you have people that are contributing to this that actually don't live in Wilsonville. They just work in Wilsonville,
Right.
but the money stays here.
Correct.
So those folks are commuting from wherever they are commuting, but we're benefiting from that, from them working here, so.
And that's a statewide assessment, right?
Yes.
Everybody that works in Oregon is paying that.
Right. Everybody in
percentage.
this room right now, yes.
And everybody outside of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Counselor West?
I think it's great that in the city of Wilsonville that we offer the free service. You saw me in Smart the other day trying to figure out a route for my own kid so that he could get somewhere, which by the way is terrifying when you start sending your kid. But I feel confident with our system that it's safe and you guys are doing a great job. I guess I keep hearing the word free, and for 2 years it sounds like it's definitely that way. But I do get a concern that we just get accustomed to it just being free and that our ratepayers will then win if it does change and they get hit with a rate increase and they have always expected free, we're setting up kind of a false, expectation that that's always how it's going to be. And I want it to be as equitable, as fair as possible. But I wonder if the trips running outside the city should totally be free all the time. Within the city core, I think we have a great thing going, and I think the business community has been incredibly generous with participating in that. But I guess that's my concern is in 2 years, I mean, nothing's guaranteed, and we see some budget downfalls coming even from in the future that are coming down the pike. So I just put that as a cautionary tale, but I'm willing to hear from everybody on the council, but I think that you already mentioned some of those same concerns.
Yeah, I mean, the concern is that you offer something and then you have to take it away. But I'm satisfied with the answer.
Right.
It's more of a question of how council feels about it in terms of, it's not free because if you have a job, you're paying for transit in Oregon now, so.
And I think
They are
Counselor Lehan, when she pointed out that the Route 2X used to be free.
Right.
Yeah,
And we
did.
took it
Yeah,
away.
I was gonna say.
At the
And-
request of the
right.
riders.
Right.
Right.
So if it comes, the push point from a policy standpoint is if it went away and then somehow we had to increase local payroll taxes to accommodate this service that used to be grant funded. I think that's a story, that's a different story, right? That's a different discussion to have with
Right,
council.
Right, and I don't, based on my, 3 decades of doing this, I don't see if, let's say the funding went away, I don't see that as being a trigger to increasing the payroll tax. I mean, there's so many other
That would be the
things.
only concern that I think
Yeah.
locally that people would have.
Yeah, I've got other projects that would trigger that.
That would do that, but
Yeah.
not this one.
Yeah, this is not one of them.
Yeah, but it is true that we used to have, it used to be free.
It used to all be free.
And then we started charging, right? Right, yeah, both of the out-of-town trips. So the fact that people did get used to that, things change and riders change.
And keep
so
in mind, every
they would
person
do
on a
that.
bus is one less car on the road.
Yeah.
We all
I
benefit
was
from
gonna say,
that.
and
It's
in the
true.
corridor,
Yes.
it gets,
Yeah.
every rider car we get out of the I-5 corridor on
It's a
these-
good
Is a
thing.
net positive.
Totally agree. Quick thing, does the increase of Frog Pond increase the population and building that we're seeing coming online and how fast we've grown, does that impact financial feasibility over the next few years?
No,
I would-
we don't get
No.
funding from residents.
So the fact,
It potentially could increase ridership with.
because you would have to
couples
have,
with
it would increase your
grants.
demand, right?
Yes.
So that you would just say that would
Possibly.
increase the opportunity for future grants then?
Right.
Okay.
right. But we have a plan, we're working, on a plan.
If we get light rail, then yes. Then we become like the West Hills in Portland, where you got all these huge parking rides for really wealthy people that, we can, never mind.
So do we have a plan to evaluate success of the expanded route frequency, and do any kind of mid-course correction if it should appear to be prudent?
Right. Well, as you know, Mayor, one of the things that I talk about is that we're nimble, and we are that. And as a matter of fact, we're developing performance standards for the entire system. And we will use those standards to judge all of our service, not just the 2X, but for all of our service. And we will be able to make adjustments where necessary, increase, decrease, and in some cases, eliminate a service. There's a process you have to go through, public outreach, but we're going to try to make sure that the resources that we have, limited as they are being spent in the most prudent way possible. That
We
is
have
our
done
goal.
that with OIT, we've done it with Convergys. We've tried to just do some
Right.
pilot things because we do have that nimbleness.
Right.
I don't even know if that's a word.
No, it's-
But we have the
I
ability
like
to be
it.
nimble. So if it doesn't work after a while, we figure that out and we make adjustments.
Yeah, yeah.
Councilor Akable?
I think I'll be curious as this rolls out too. I'm thinking back to, remember the very beginning when I was on the task force in my first few months on council, and I'm kind of reflecting back on some of the conversations that I remember from that, and as well as my own experience too. I used to take the bus down to Salem years ago when I worked in Salem, and it worked great. It was fantastic. And I also know that now, in my position now, and responsibilities at home now with a kid that's on the other end of a commute, that I might be more hesitant without that midday option to get back. And so I'm curious if this will actually result in seeing increased ridership on the morning and evening times, because people will feel security in having midday options, even if they're not using those options. So we might not see numbers increase in the midday, but like maybe it will manifest in other people like, oh yeah, this could work for me because I have whatever responsibility on the other end of my commute, and I need to know that there's a way that I can
Or it's
get
an
back.
insurance
and-
policy.
Exactly.
If your kid gets sick or something, you have
That's
to go to school.
exactly what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. Like kid gets sick, or there's the late start morning, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean,
Yeah.
something like that.
And
So
a-
I'd be curious, like if we don't see high numbers, but we're seeing growth in other things, then I would still also consider this possibly a great success too.
Yeah. A great example of that is our partnership with Canby to provide that midday service. So before it was just a commuter service, and since we've had that midday service start almost a year ago, we have seen increases in the AM and PM.
Yeah.
So like big
Yeah.
increases.
So are you looking for
great.
direction from council on which option? I hear you saying you're most comfortable with option one. Are you looking for a council agreement on that?
Well, certainly want council to be comfortable with,
Okay.
and we obviously, we won't do anything without knowing that they support that direction.
Okay, so now
All right, so
need
we
to
got
hear
2
from-
minutes. So is anybody, staff is recommending alternative 1 and making arguments about why it's most appropriate? Anybody that feels like that's not the most appropriate thing or something we should not engage to see how it works? Or are we supportive of alternative 1?
Supportive.
All right, I think there you go.
All right.
I don't know if
Give it a
it's a
whirl.
vote or not, but
Hey, we're back on
So,
time.
no, we're not back on time because
No, we're not.
I'm gonna,
It's not one issue.
we're gonna have to talk about council succession protocol, and I guess we'll have to do that in mayor's
We can do it
business
under mayor's business.
downstairs. So please have your packet available to you when we go to that.
Thank you.
And we'll end out at 6:59 here.